that she's finna be limited to reps. They already saying she gonna be playing off the ball. And do we need any more sabotaging from them to kind of tell us, hey, make your fans chill out? Because we are the ones that's backing all of this motion for the Indiana Fever. It's the Caitlin Clark fans. No disrespect to the Indiana Fever fans that's up there in Indianapolis and all of the other fans that's been following the team, but we know we're a large portion of that motion.
The Indiana Fever's handling of their second-round draft pick has drawn criticism, with the organization's decision to sign Justine Pissott to a developmental contract raising questions about whether the pick was ever intended to result in a genuine roster spot. Under the new 2026 CBA, a developmental contract works as follows. Once signed, no other team can contact the player or her agent for 14 days. She can appear in a maximum of 12 games before the 13th game triggers a mandatory conversion to a standard contract, at which point salary cap rules apply on a prorated basis.
Large portion of that motion come from, and that come from CCFC alone. Hell, CCFC is the life support of the WNBA right now. I think we all could agree on that. So with that being said, let's talk about this move right here that has everyone talking. So we know the Indiana Fever had 2 draft picks, well 3, but it was the second round draft pick that was supposed to have been, to me, based on what I seen, a makeup for the whole situation.
After the initial 1-4-day window closes, a second team can offer a standard contract, and the original team then has the option to match and promote the player to their standard roster or decline, freeing her to sign elsewhere. The criticism centers on timing and intent. Because the Fever hold the player's draft rights regardless, there was no pressing need to lock her into a developmental contract immediately. Teams cannot contact drafted players the way they can free agents.
The whole situation involving Raven Johnson, because a lot of people wanted the Fever to go big. So they went and got a big. But here's the pickle. They signed this set bid that they drafted to a developmental contract, which means that she's not on the damn team. So you mean to tell me y'all draft this young lady and she ain't on the team yet? Let's pull up the article and see exactly what the hell the Indiana Fever put out with this article. Then I'm going to show y'all exactly.
Several observers pointed out that the organization could have waited until after training camp rosters were finalized, then made the developmental signing at that point, effectively extending the window by an additional 2 weeks. By moving early, the Fever created a situation where their second-round pick is technically on the roster in a limited capacity rather than being given a full training camp opportunity to compete for a standard spot. For fans who viewed the Pissott pick as the organization's answer to the criticism over not drafting size, the developmental contract structure made the selection feel more like a placeholder than a genuine commitment.
Article. Then I'm going to show y'all exactly what a developmental contract is, because this developmental contract situation is very, very weird. But this article's not pulling up, so we just going to move on to this. So this, shout out to Ken Swift, man. That's a name we haven't heard in a mighty long time. So Ken Swift put together this right here. WNBA players developmental contract explained under the new 2026 CBA. How they become regular players.
On a separate note, Caitlin Clark was spotted at a Habitat for Humanity build alongside head coach Stephanie White and other Fever staff members. The event, which drew attention after being shared by a journalist who covered the scene, positioned Clark back in Indiana and active ahead of the season opener. With roughly 3 weeks remaining before the Fever's first game, the appearance served as an early signal that Clark's return to the court is approaching and that she is engaged and present in the lead-up to training camp.
Playing under the new 2026 CBA. How they become regular players. Under 4-year service or 60 minutes previous season. Signed developmental contract locks them in for 14 days. Max 12 games played, 2 spots before the 13th game. Convert to a standard contract. Salary cap applies prorated. Now, the poaching rules and right of first refusal. So no contact within the first 14 days. So she got a 14-day contract with the Fever.
The Indiana Fever have placed Justine Pissott on a developmental contract, and while the move carries some potential upside, the structure of that deal and the organization's track record make it difficult to feel optimistic about how this plays out for the player or the franchise. Pat is a 6'4" perimeter shooter with a quick release, a player profile that is genuinely uncommon in women's basketball. True floor spacers at that height with legitimate long-range shooting ability are rare.
She got a 14-day contract with the Fever, no matter what. 2 weeks. Mind you, they drafted this young lady in the second round, and she pretty much got drafted for a 2-week damn contract. Then it goes on to say, Team B offers standard contract after the 14 days, which means to tell me, just from the outside looking in, they don't plan on keeping this young lady, Justine Pissott. You know, to me,
the Fever have essentially acknowledged through this signing that Shekinna Walker-Kimbrough is a guaranteed roster member and that Jessica Timmons is also secure in her spot. What makes this particularly difficult to stomach is the organization reportedly placed Pat on a developmental deal without ever watching her play in a live setting. That detail alone signals where she sits in the pecking order before training camp even opens.
You know, to me, based on what I'm seeing here. Now, it's a Team A's option. Match and promote, player stays with Team A on a standard roster, or decline, player joins Team B. So, basically, Ken Swift tried to explain himself here a little bit, but it's kind of, I would say, condescending. He stated by signing her to a developmental contract now, no team could even talk.
The developmental contract structure is the core of the problem. Under the current rules, if any other team wants to sign Pat within the 4-day window, the Fever hold right of first refusal, but exercising that right would require them to cut a guaranteed roster member on the spot. Based on how this front office has operated, that is not something they are likely to do.
Contract now, no team could even talk to her for 14 days. No teams could contact her or her agent. So this might not be a bad move unless I'm wrong. Someone correct me. This is definitely a bad move. This is definitely a bad move, man, because it's telling me they wasted a draft pick. I don't understand how a team could talk to one of the draftees. She's not a free agent. Make no sense. Apparently, they can talk to their agents if they think they will be cut or left on the developmental team.
Every player on the current roster has effectively been promised a role. The one exception is Jessica Timmons, who has not established herself as an undroppable piece, but even that feels uncertain given the organization's recent patterns. This creates a scenario where the Fever are almost incentivized to keep Pat out of the spotlight during preseason.
Not like a quick trigger and wide open shooter is basically is something that not a lot of people have. A 6'4" shooter with a quick trigger. There are very few of them in the world of women's basketball. There are. Like, it's not like this is this really common archetype of player. It's not. And the Indiana Fever have now, as good as officially said, we're bringing in Victoria Walker-Kimbrough for the long run.
If she performs well even in a shooting drill, let alone in a scrimmage, other teams are going to come calling. The New York Liberty specifically have built a significant part of their roster construction philosophy around identifying undervalued players, acquiring them cheaply, and finding roles for them on the margins. A 6'4" shooter with a fast trigger is exactly the kind of profile they would prioritize.
Victoria Walker-Kimbrough for the long run. And that Michaela Timpson is going to be on the roster. The only thing I'm going to say is that the Indiana Fever, everyone's like, oh, you know, if she develops well, she's going to call them. No, she's going to call to another team. If you are a Fever fan, you better hope that Justine Pissott goes 0 for 20 in preseason. Because if she steps in preseason, doesn't get cooked on the defensive end, and hits 2 3-point...
The Atlanta Dream have been actively pursuing shooters at every position. There will be no shortage of interest if Pat shows anything. The outcome is fairly binary.
Get cooked on the defensive end and hits 2 3-pointers in a row. She is no longer a member of the Indiana Fever. Why is that? There are going to be 14 other teams in WNBA willing to cut somebody for a 6'4" sharpshooter. Sorry, 14 is exaggerating. There might be 11 teams willing to cut somebody for a 6'4" sharpshooter, who you have the reserved rights to for 4 years. Who you can sign for 4 years on a minimum, by the way. You have reserved rights to her for 4 years. Because you better believe the Indiana Fever are not going.
Either Pat is not ready for the WNBA level in any meaningful capacity, in which case the developmental slot is wasted on a player who will not contribute a draft pick used on someone who will never make a meaningful impact. Or she is ready, in which case she will be gone before the season starts because the Fever will not match. The organization has used 27 of their last 31 draft selections on players who did not stick.
To match any signing. So if you guys don't know, basically, if you guys don't know, the Indiana Fever only have right of first refusal to her. She is a developmental contract. If anyone else wants to sign her, the Indiana Fever have to cut somebody on the spot, and they're not going to do that. I'm telling you that pretty much, not for a fact, because I don't know this organization exactly, but they're not going to.
This pattern is not new. The historical context here matters. Since Kelsey Mitchell was drafted in 2018, Lexi Hull was the first player the Fever selected who made it past her rookie contract.
But they're not going to cut somebody. This is an organization that did everything they could to accommodate a player who quit the team last year. Who did everything in their power to accommodate a player who quit. This is not an ideal scenario. Because especially the New York Liberty and the Atlanta Dream. The Atlanta Dream just want shooters everywhere. And you ever say, why did the Atlanta Dream not take her? Because she wasn't worth a first-round pick.
Lauren Cox, drafted in the lottery in 2020, was cut after one season. Kaiser Gondrezick, taken in the lottery in 2021, was cut after one season. Emily Engelbrecht, another lottery pick in 2022, was cut after one season.
She wasn't there. The Atlanta Dream didn't have a second-round pick. The New York Liberty, all the New York Liberty do, if you guys don't know, they do not use they just stash their draft picks. They stash their draft picks and they get a bunch of stashes and sign players on the margins really well. They look for players that other teams have kind of underrated and they go and sign them. That's what the New York Liberty do. That is what the New York Liberty do. And I only fully understand.
3 consecutive lottery selections released after single seasons. The organizational commitment to developing drafted players has been essentially non-existent. Other franchises operate differently.
Why Liberty are so good. But now you have got a situation with Justine Pissott where she has officially not made the team. And people are like, oh, these developmental slots are going to be great for players. Yes, the developmental slots are great for players that you're never going to play. This is realistically a developmental slot if you want to bring in a player. Fair enough. If you're an
Teams like the Liberty have offered players full contracts for short stretches before transitioning them to developmental deals, creating a pathway that keeps the player earning and gives the organization flexibility. The precedent exists for teams to bring a developmental player up, give them a few games at full contract, then return them to developmental status while maintaining the relationship. The Fever's history suggests they will not pursue any such creative arrangement. If a player is not ready to contribute immediately, they are released.
If you're an organization like the Tempo, because it's very, very clear that one of their developmental slot players is a developmental slot player because she's not going to be over the start of the season. Frida Booner. So basically, it allows them to go out with 12 players during the preseason. They have 12 players, and I'm not sure. Actually, no. Frida Bruner will be back to start season. She's not going to make training camp. So basically, she's signing on a developmental deal. They're going to bring.
For a player with Pat's physical profile and shooting ability, that approach seems especially short-sighted. A 6'4" shooter who can space the floor alongside Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell is not something teams manufacture easily. If another organization recognizes that value and makes a legitimate offer, the window to keep her in Indianapolis will close before the front office acts on it.